I'm Joe Lample. When I created Growing a Greener World, I had one goal: to tell stories of everyday people, innovators, entrepreneurs, forward-thinking leaders who are all, in ways both big and small, dedicated to organic gardening and farming, lightening our footprint, conserving vital resources, protecting natural habitats, making a tangible difference for us all. They're real, they're passionate, they're all around us. They're the game changers who are literally growing a greener world and inspiring the rest of us to do the same. Growing a greener world, it's more than a movement, it's our mission. When it comes to knowing the cause and effect of making the right pruning cut, this expert not only has the track record, but the garden to back it up. Along with her many horticultural talents, Tracy Desabato Aust holds claim to one of the most popular gardening books ever written, entitled The Well-Tended Perennial Garden. It's widely considered as the Bible of perennial maintenance. She's a veteran and in-demand garden designer, writer, and international presenter, and award-winning triathlete. With all she has going on, she still manages to keep an impeccable garden pruned to perfection.
I guess I became an expert with pruning perennials because I started with a small article for the Brooklyn Botanic Garden, and it's such an interesting and dynamic topic that they felt that I should do a larger piece for fine gardening, and so I continued to do some research and work with it. And then it led to my book, The Well-Tended Perennial Garden. And because it's such an interesting and variable topic, what to prune, when to prune, how to prune, will vary from region to region, with the age of the plant, with soil fertility, and even just with, our normal gardeners' objectives. So it involved looking at about 400 to 500 species and measuring them, recording the height that they were when they were pruned, and then what was most interesting is going back and looking and comparing pruned plants to unpruned plants and seeing what the result was. And that work had never been done and never been recorded, and I think that's what earned me, the title of the Queen of Deadheading, or Tracy Scissorhands.
Now, just about everywhere I go, people stop and want to know more about pruning, right, Tracy? I'm
Absolutely.
sure you encounter the same thing. But people seem to have this fear of it, call it prunophobia, and really nothing ventured, nothing gained. There are a lot of reasons why we should be pruning.
There are, and people are afraid. I think they're afraid they're going to kill the plants, but in the case, especially with perennials, they're extremely forgiving, and pruning gives us so many choices. So I urge people to experiment, have fun, and give it a try.
Yeah, worst case scenario maybe is that you cut off the blooming opportunity.
Absolutely. You're not going to kill the plant. So many times people think they're going to kill it, but really maybe you'll just prevent flowering that season.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have an example here of a couple wonderful plants, the poppy, for example. Now, would you prune that?
No, this is a case now, and that's a great question, Joe. So, as important to know what to prune is what not to prune. And certain plants like the annual poppy will form a beautiful seed head, so we want that to remain, and also it will self-sow, so we want that spontaneity in the garden. One of the perennials like columbine, the aqualesia, very attractive seed heads again, and I like to let that sow itself freely about the garden, so we don't prune. Also, we wouldn't prune if we want to attract birds and bring wildlife into the garden, so the ornamental seed heads is another good reason not to prune.
Great food source.
Exactly.
Now, on the other hand, you have the salvia here, and this would be a classic case of pruning that you would do.
Absolutely. This is Salvia nemorosa, the perennial salvia, and this is a plant where if we're pruning, we can actually prolong bloom, sometimes by 2 months, or we can cause a repeat of bloom. And people often ask, well, where do I cut? Where do I make the pruning cut? And so we look for the old or the dead head, and we come in and we'd cut just above the lateral 2 leaves. And so what we would have here is flowering on those 2 buds.
Okay, so these would come up and make new flower buds.
Absolutely. And then eventually, we might go down once more to these 2, just depending on how the plant is responding. And then we'll get new growth, Joe, that develops at the base. And we'll eventually take this entire plant, cut it to the base, and that'll cause a repeat bloom. And so what we're doing is we're improving the appearance, we're prolonging bloom, we're causing repeat bloom, all by proper pruning.
So Tracy, we just came off of reasons to deadhead to produce more flowering. What are we
Right.
doing here? We're about to prune these.
We're pruning asters, or we can do this with many of our autumn flowering plants and some of the summer flowering plants, is pruning prior to flowering, or preemptive pruning. And we do that in an effort to reduce the height to eliminate the need for staking. I found most people don't like to stake and don't do a very good job of it. So this will eliminate that little maintenance chore, as well as, in many cases, it'll delay flowering. So particularly on some of the summer flowering plants, we can go in and we'll have a 2, maybe 3 week delay in flowering. So we could do that and maybe time the flowering of that perennial with a special event or a photo shoot or something in that realm, yes. So in this case, we'd come in and just go in and just cut perhaps right to here and cut back by half. And what's fun too, Joe, is on some of the outer stems, you might come in even a little lower. So here's where we might do our 2/3, pruning that a little bit lower, pruning this stem here a little lower, and bringing this one a little bit higher. And that way we get this kind of a gradation in height, and everything's not flowering at the same height. And so we'd come in these inner stems by half, and then this outer stem bringing it down maybe a little bit lower. And this will all fill in, and we won't have those ugly legs that we often see on asters in particular, where there's no leaves and it's looking very unsightly.
And you've also cut some of these back right over here.
I have, yeah.
And
So
it's
as an
amazing
example,
how vigorous these respond to that simple cut. And how long ago did you cut these, Tracy?
this was just about a week ago, and isn't that fun, Joe? Look how you can see the pruning cut and see all this new growth that's starting to come and fill in. And again, you know, I think this gives people just a little incentive, a little inspiration, if you will, to do this pruning and to see the results. And I did this here earlier because this foxglove, this is a perennial foxglove, and it, I wanted to make sure that we could see the flowering, and so the aster had gotten so large. So there's another reason to prune, is to make space for things that are, you know, flowering or happening now in the garden. And then as this finishes, I'll deadhead it, and this aster will continue to grow, and it will fill in the space, and it'll flower later.
But we haven't talked about the spring flowering plants, and you don't necessarily use your common pruners for that, do you?
No. I like to use the Okatsuni head shear, so it's a really lightweight and sharp.
Tracy scissor hands, by the way.
Yes.
Now I know why.
And so we can do this pruning, this shearing after flowering on many of the common flowering spring plants like the rock cress or candy tuft iberis, or some of the pinks, the dianthus, or one that a lot of people have, which is phlox subulata, or the moss phlox.
Yes.
So we can come in and really just go in, and we're shearing this by a half, and we can come in and shape it at the same time. So we just come in and cut, and so you'll notice, you know, we're not getting directly above like the lateral leaves like we talked about earlier, and that's fine because these plants will fill in quickly and they'll look beautiful the rest of the season.
So by cutting back, we're not stimulating new growth. We're not going to get new flowers because these are spring flowering, and we're past that time. We're really just creating then a more tidy plant, and one that is not going to flop open like we tend to see so often, where you have that big space in the center.
Right, that unsightly hole that develops that we're used to seeing, particularly with that moss phlox that so many people love to grow.
Yeah.
So it's just, it's a wonderful technique, and it's so fast.
Yeah. Designers and horticulturalists across the country are passionate about the art and science of proper plant placement and pruning. And around Santa Barbara, California, landscape architect, horticultural instructor, and overall garden wise guy Billy Goodnick is a strong advocate for putting the right plant in the right place for protecting them and the environment.
I was listening to an interview with Joan Rivers, and she was explaining how she makes fun of everything because if she didn't laugh, she would probably start to cry. That's what I like to do with Crimes Against Horticulture. I like to poke fun and have a little fun with the things people do in their gardens, but there's really a point to be made that there's also some environmental harm that comes along with those practices. A lot of the situations that end up being crimes against horticulture really start because people don't understand the habits of a plant. Every plant has its genetic destiny. It's hardwired to grow a certain way. You can't have a redwood tree and through wishful thinking hope that it's going to behave like a petunia in a window box. So the first thing you do is you try to understand the plant that you're about to put in the ground. Read the tag that's on the label. Look it up in a reliable reference book or ask a nurseryman how this plant is going to grow. The key thing is to understand how big a plant is going to get and put it in a place where it can do that and can do it naturally, so you don't have to shape it and force it into these unusual shapes that people come up with. Yeah, it seems like everywhere I go in the country there's sort of that plant that everybody loves to hack, and in Southern California it's bougainvillea. Most of them get, I don't know, 15, 20 feet across, and yet people plant them for quick fill and they put them 3 or 4 feet from each other, which is, kind of ridiculous. What ends up happening is to keep them the right size, they cut back all the tip growth, and that's why people choose bougainvillea in the first place, is because that's where all the gorgeous flowers are. So it's just this continuing process of making the plant uglier, shortening its lifespan by continually pruning it, and just having a life of maintenance. Just doesn't make sense. Putting the wrong shrub in the wrong place is bad enough, but when you put the wrong tree in the wrong place, the problems just compound. Surface roots will start raising concrete in a sidewalk. It's a safety hazard. Around your house, it can bust the foundation or take out your patio. Yeah, when you have a tree in this sort of situation, a lot of people say, well, that's okay, we can do some root pruning, which is expensive to begin with, but on top of that, it can often destabilize the tree, and that doesn't make any sense. Okay, my idea of a perfect plant is a plant that gets as high as you need it to grow and stops, gets as wide as the space allowed, stops, provides fruit, flowers, fragrance, and in a pinch it'll run down to Ben & Jerry's for you at midnight and pick out some chunky monkeys. So, I don't think I'll ever find that plant, but wouldn't it be wonderful?
Now, where one gardener may like a closely cropped or shaped plant or tree through selective pruning or shearing, others, like Billy, prefer a more natural form. And I think it's a safe bet. We all like his idea about it being able to go out and get us ice cream. And there's another thing nearly all of us can agree on. The heavy hand of a chainsaw can be over the top. They're everywhere. Trees disfigured and dying from years of abuse. Known as tree topping, it's the most harmful tree pruning practice known. Yet despite more than 25 years of spoken and written information by countless other like-minded professionals, it remains a common practice. According to the International Society of Arboriculture, the most common reason given for topping is to reduce the size of a tree, either because it's become too large for the property or a perception that it may pose a hazard. Ironically, topping is neither a viable solution to reducing size or hazard. When a tree is topped, up to 100% of the leaf-bearing crown is removed. And since leaves are the food source for any tree, the absence of the leaves can lead to temporary or even permanent starvation. As a defensive action, the starving tree responds by rapidly sending out multiple shoots from latent buds below each cut. This action is the tree's survival mechanism to put out a new flush of leaves as soon as possible. But if the tree doesn't have sufficient stored energy reserves to respond in this way, it will seriously harm the tree, even leading to its premature demise. As new shoots grow to desperately replace their food-making factory, they do so rapidly, sending up numerous water sprouts. In some species, these new shoots can grow up to 20 feet in a year. Trees will grow back rapidly, and they don't slow until they reach about their original size. The new growth that rapidly ascends from latent buds just below each cut is only anchored in the outermost layer of the parent branch. These weak attachments will never have the structural integrity of the original branch and can break off easily, even years later, when they are large and heavy. When the occasion arises and it becomes necessary to modify the height or spread of a tree, consult or hire a professional arborist. An arborist will determine the type of pruning that is necessary to maintain and improve the health, appearance, and safety of your trees. Certified or professional arborists won't use tree-damaging spikes unless they're removing the tree completely. They won't list tree topping as a service in the phone book, and they'll never recommend it to you as a solution, because it's not. We've heard that pruning is important, but more often than not, we're paralyzed into doing nothing for fear of making a mistake. But by not pruning, that could be the biggest mistake. We have to prune for several reasons: to control size or shape, to remove dead or diseased branches or limbs, to improve structure, and the one that makes believers out of all of us, to stimulate new growth or flowering. Now, cutting back or pruning to stimulate new growth, that is so counterintuitive. But once you understand the science behind it, it's a game changer. Take this oak leaf hydrangea, for example. Now, this tip bud is called the terminal bud, and within the bud, there's a growth suppression hormone called auxin. And as long as that hormone is there, it's signaling these side buds to remain dormant. But once I make the cut, the suppression hormone is gone. In response, these former dormant buds begin to grow rapidly, and for every one cut, I get 2 branches. And now that you know a little science behind the cut, here are a few more tips to make you a pruning ninja in no time. First, timing is everything. Know that there are better times of the year to prune than others. Late winter or early spring is generally the best time to prune, just prior to new growth starting to develop. Although pruning does stimulate new growth, that doesn't apply during dormancy, since dormancy trumps the rest. The next best time is early to midsummer, after full leaf expansion. But much of a plant's stored energy has gone into producing all that new growth of spring. If you cut this new growth off, you've wasted the energy. Now the plant is stimulated to put on new growth, which can be stressful to the plant in summer when conditions are likely to be dry and hot and reserves are at a premium. And lastly, early to mid-fall is the least favorable time to prune. Pruning then can signal the plant to produce new growth just as it's sending nutrients and energy into reserves for the cold months ahead. Not only can valuable reserves be diverted back into new growth can be damaged or killed by colder temperatures, creating access points for overwintering pests and diseases. Next, know the rule of thumb for proper timing on when to prune certain flowering plants. Some bloom on current season's growth, so they should be pruned in late winter because they'll bloom in the same year. One of the best examples of that is butterfly bush, but some other common examples are abelia, clethra, spirea, which is this, and some examples of hydrangea, including Annabelle. Other shrubs produce flowers on old growth or wood that was produced in the previous year. If you were to prune them in late winter, you'd be cutting off all the flower buds. Not a good idea. The best time to prune those type of plants is usually around midsummer, right after they bloom and before they've had a chance to set new buds. Some common examples of these kind of plants include azalea and rhododendron, which are these, forsythia, hollies, and some types of hydrangea, including mophead and oak leaf. And know where to make the cut. For plants with a single bud below the area you want to cut, find a place on the branch about a ½ inch above an outward facing bud, and then make the cut at an angle with the high point facing out also. For stems and branches with buds located in pairs, also known as opposite, make the cut about a ½ inch above the bud set and straight across. Finally, know the limits on how much to cut. A good rule of thumb is to take no more than 1/3 of the total length of the branch, measuring from the tip back. Now, of course, there are exceptions to every rule, and some plants can handle severe pruning, but you can't go wrong by sticking to the rule of 1/3. Now, you know, there's really no need to fear pruning. Once you just convince yourself that most plants benefit from pruning, then it's just a matter of getting started and building your confidence. And before you know it, you'll be fearlessly pruning like a pro. Well, after today, I hope we've helped you understand that putting the right plant or tree in the right place and making the right cut can help you cut down on your ongoing maintenance and expense. But if you have any more questions about pruning, we have some great articles and links on our website, along with Chef Nathan Lyon's full cooking video and his recipe. The address is simple. It's growingagreenerworld.com. I'm Joe Lample. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you back here next time for more Growing a Greener World. And there's another reason for pruning that we haven't talked about yet that might come in handy for you too, and that is to open up the view.
Just compelled to
This
go
is what
out
happens when
and turn this shrub into
trying to
a
figure out the
flying
scene,
saucer
and
the next to it into a
we don't know what the heck we're
jelly
doing
bean
yet,
and
and we have to get it done. And then Joe is trying to cover his tail, and you know, with the powers that be,
Is this
and
going to be a TV?
Hey, I look pretty good on TV. Maybe I should be on TV.
We'll
I don't
catch
think
it.
so.
We'll add you in post.
Keep your day job, Carl. You're best behind the camera.